Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Cashflow Unscripted. Cashflow Unscripted is a podcast coming to you from India with topical insights from leaders of the Indian business and finance community. My name is Ankur Bhageria. I'm the founder of Cashflow, and I have with me today Mr. Snehal Shah. Snehal is a chartered accountant by qualification and currently Group CFO at Century Textiles and Industries Limited. He's a veteran leader in the finance industry with over 30 years of experience, spanning financial services and various industrial and manufacturing sectors. He's been associated with Aditya Birla Group in various leadership roles for 2 decades. Today, we take a deep dive into the CFO's role in driving decisions and strategy for a highly diversified business such as Century Group and Aditya Birla Group. We'll get into some of the challenges, the considerations, and some anecdotes of balancing the divergent demands of different industries within the same corporate banner. Welcome, Snehal. Welcome to Cashflow Unscripted. It's really great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Ankur, for Cashflow Unscripted. Really a pleasure to be with you today, and I hope I do some justice to this conversation that we are going to have. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And just to start off, Snehal, let's talk about your role at Century. You are the group CFO of three very different businesses, the paper business, textile business, and real estate. Can you shed some light on the strategic role that the CFO needs to play, especially when it comes to a diversified business, both within the organization and more broadly, with the board and the parent company?
Okay, Ankur. So maybe it would be helpful if I start with a bit of an organizational context, although you mentioned some of it. So Century Textiles and Industries Limited is a public limited company registered in Mumbai. Till 1951, the company operated only one cotton textile mill in Mumbai, and many people who know Mumbai well would know the iconic mill and the building in which we sit over here, which is known as Century Bhavan. And it was actually being run by Mr. B.K. Birla, who sadly passed away last year. Mr. B.K. Birla, as you know, is the grandfather of Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla. And now Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla has taken the chairmanship of this company, and we are, of course, yet to be formally merged with the Aditya Birla Group. But of course, we still have the leadership of Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla. Post the mill in Mumbai, the company, of course, had expanded into various activities. We had a small textile mill after we closed the Mumbai mill. We had a small textile mill in Bharuch in Gujarat, which we still have. Then we had a pulp and paper division, which is in Uttarakhand, in a place called Lal Kuan, very close to Nainital. Then we have the Century Rayon plant, which is in Kalyan. But that plant right now is being given on an operating lease to Grasim. So we don't manage that right now. It is Grasim which managed it. We just get the lease. We had the cement division, a big cement division, which we have recently demerged, and it has been merged with Ultratech Cement. So right now, CTIL has 3 independent divisions. As I mentioned, Birla Century, which is a textile mill. It makes fabrics and it makes home textiles. Fabrics essentially is, your shirt and pant material, and the home textile is basically bed linen. Then we have Century Pulp and Paper, which is one of the largest and the only probably integrated pulp and paper mill in India, which makes writing and printing paper, it makes packaging board, it makes tissue, and is also making rayon grade pulp. And what is also unique is that we have the capability of producing these products through various raw material, which is, of course, wood is one of them, then bagasse is one of them, recycled paper is one of them. So it's kind of a complete package. And of course, somewhere in 2016, we got into real estate business. We started with 2 commercial buildings, which are in Mumbai, very prestigious buildings, which are right now almost 100% leased. But now we are moving into what is known as the residential sector. We already have 2 launch projects, one in Mumbai and one in Bangalore. We are very soon going to launch a project in Gurugram and another project in Bangalore, and probably we'll start a phase 2 project in Kalyan 2. But our most prestigious project, which is going to be over the land where the mill was there in Worli, that is going to be a very big project for us. So this is broadly the scenario about Century Textiles and Industries Limited. Coming to the CFO role, so prior to my takeover as the CFO, this role was in Century Textile a more of a consolidator role, and each business divisions, as you call it, had actually an independent finance function. So there could be different policies, processes, different ERPs, different way of working capital management at the unit, and so on. So in terms of funding, only the long-term funding was done by the CFO at the head office. And this is not usually how the structure is in ABG, for example, where we always had a very robust, central finance division particularly for the diversified companies. So when I took over, I can say that that primary responsibility was to create a similar CFD or a central finance division for CTL, particularly for developing, standardized processes, systems, and guidelines around financial and risk management across all the divisions. So, I mean, it's like being the custodian of the company assets and monitor the financial health and report any deviations to the board of directors. So right now, the divisions are now provided broad guidelines with respect to utilization and management of funds. And the CFO provides guidance and consults in individual divisions whenever required or mandated. So all statements are consolidated at corporate for preparation of the annual report. The CFO finalizes the banks for the business dealings and operations. Of course, relationships are locally managed by the divisions for the day-to-day operations. So another thing which we have done is, now the entire treasury, including FX, foreign exchange management, insurance, and the M&A activities, F&E, are completely driven at the head office in the CFD, and that is the CFO's office. And divisions can utilize the funds only as per the limits given to them. And additionally, the role also leads the group's legal and company secretarial functions. So there is, of course, another area which is, the investor relationship management. So when I took over as a CFO, the company actually did not even have a semblance of a investor relationship process in place. So given the fact that we would be half the size, both in terms of top and bottom line, post the cement demerger, it was important to have some sort of a continuous interface with the investor community. So this was more so as all eyes are now on our real estate business to drive the growth and the profitability of the company. And the investors expect, more kind of transparent information.
And on paper, centralizing the finance function obviously, has a lot of merit. But when actually implementing the centralization, were there challenges that you ran into or challenges that you faced? Which and how did you sort of solve for these challenges? Would love to understand a little more on that.
So, to be very honest, I mean, there was no kind of the only challenge actually was, all these years, for very, very long years, these functions were operating almost, independently. So taking away some of the things that they were doing, from them, actually there was a lot of resistance as it is, you understand how people would react if something which they have been doing is suddenly taken over from them. But we had to, I'll give you a typical example of foreign exchange management, for example. So if there is, let's say the paper division is a big importer, for example. So it will always cover on the, it will always be covering its imports. On the other hand, the textile business is a net importer. So it is covering on the imports. So I'm thinking, we are unnecessarily paying, if you look at it as a company as a whole, I just have to net off the imports and exports of two divisions, and the net figure is what I need to actually go out in the market and cover myself against,
Yeah.
So that was not happening, and we are kind of only helping the banks, on some sort of a basis point earning on the covers that we were doing. So this is how we, first have to explain to everybody. And I guess in spite of all that, people have their own doubts. Then there are issues related to how will you account for in the divisions accounts and how will you share the profitability, etc. and all that. But I think we went there and there was a bit of resistance in the beginning. In spite of having good logic, people have these closed minds. So we had to open those minds, and at the end of the day, I think we are doing well now. Almost for more than a year, I've been managing Forex centrally, and it is paying good dividends for us.
Yeah.
So these are the few things. Yes, you're right that paper division was the biggest one in terms of running business, and naturally they didn't want to probably give away certain things that earlier they used to do. So it's always a challenge.
Yeah. Do you think some of these, and a lot of organizations today still have decentralized finance functions? When it comes, what would be your advice to them, and if they're thinking about centralization? What are some of the key, success factors or some imperatives that are required for it to be successful? You mentioned there are a lot of people-related issues that need to be solved for, which on paper may not be that evident. Any takeaways from your experience in carrying out this activity?
So, Ankur, see, what happens is, the way I look at it is, any operation that you have, whether it is with any function or any operation that you have, whether it is finance or whether it is operations or anything, you have an operating model. Okay? And the basic pie chart of that operation model is, consisting of technology is one, people is two, the configuration that you have, in terms of what you call it, centralized, decentralized, the ownership that you have, whether outsourced, insourced, and so these are the things you've got to keep in mind when you're designing something or you're transforming something, etc. at the time. So if once you look at all those things together and then arrive at a decision that this actually makes sense, and if you logically explain it to people, this is how it looks, it will save us a cost on people, it will save us cost on technology. So essentially, we have to prove that, okay, it improves speed, it improves quality, it improves productivity, and it saves cost.
Yeah.
if you prove these few things, very few people will be able to justify that we should not do it.
Yeah.
So this is how you go about it, and in my opinion, and that's how you have to present it and take the buy-in that you probably need.
So essentially, to summarize, it's about creating a robust business case for the centralization, and I'm
Yeah,
guessing top
correct.
management buy-in would be very critical to ensure
Absolutely.
the program goes through. Yeah.
No, it is what suits you. Once you look at all these parameters that I mentioned in the operating model, for some people, decentralization might make sense. For some
Yeah.
people, centralization might make sense. For
Yeah.
some people, a complete digital model would make sense. For some people, outsourcing would make sense. So you have to see where you stand. Once you assess everything, that's when you kind of come to a conclusion that for this you just can't do a copycat kind of thing. Arey wo kar raha hai to main bhi karu.
Yeah.
You have to see how it applies to you.
Yeah. No, very interesting. Thank you so much, Snehal, for sharing those thoughts. So just shifting gears a bit, as far as the last 12 months have been concerned, no industry has really been spared, and industries like textile in particular have taken a major hit. Real estate to some extent, definitely on the commercial side, but even on the residential side to some extent. We're now seeing sort of some resurgence there. What was your experience, navigating the different group businesses through this entire COVID lockdown and the repercussions that followed thereafter?
Well, Ankur, if you see FY20, for example, we almost all businesses already were facing a lot of headwinds, if you remember.
Yeah.
So we were not, of course, spared from that headwinds. So for FY20, for example, both our textiles, the manufacturing businesses, that is textile and the pulp and paper, faced a lot of headwinds. And therefore, our revenue and EBITDA numbers were down, I think, by almost 8% and 22% respectively. Now, the thing is that at the same time, incidentally, our real estate business, which we had started, was actually showing good traction. Maybe because people were, of course, now more inclined towards corporates, etc., and we had the brand name which carried trust as a brand, and of course the products that we were probably offering were good, etc. So we had a very good start on our real estate business. But what that meant is that we had to plow in a lot of capital pretty early in that particular business. So there was a need for cash, and the other two businesses were not really doing so well to generate the cash that was probably required. The only silver lining for us was that our balance sheet was deleveraged because of the demerger of the cement division. So we had reasonably good kind of, I won't say reasonably low debt on our balance sheet. So that was a good thing. But since there was we were a little bit stretched for cash. Another thing probably was that in April 2020 we had a maturing bond of about almost 700 crores that we had to repay. So naturally, fortunately, because of the balance sheet being deleveraged, we were able to borrow money from the market. So this was pre-COVID. Huh? I'm talking about pre-COVID. So somewhere in we finished our planning and budgeting exercise for FY21. Somewhere in Feb end May or March early, we finished our PNB. So we had a fair idea in a normal year what would be where we would stand with respect to cash and how much money we probably would be required to raise. And around that time, I mean, let's not compare the interest rates right now, but even that time there were good interest rates available, good rates available, and we were fortunate, probably because of the rub-off of the ABG brand or whatever, we were able to get a good interest rate, which was better than any AA rated company which we are would be getting it. So we kind of actually raised close to 1100 crores pre-COVID for our plans for the next year. Now, so of course in April the 700 crores went off to pay the debt which was maturing, but we still now, which I can say is, we had a war chest of 400 crores. So that actually was a kind of a thing that gave me some sort of confidence, we will be able to weather any storm that comes. So that was one part of this. Second part was that we got the benefit of being into diversified business. We were getting on one hand the investors discount their price because of the conglomerate thing, but here it actually helped us. What happened was, for example, the paper business, it came into the category of essential commodities. So in fact, after the second lockdown, the government forced us to actually start the plant. So we actually started a paper plant in somewhere in May or something like that. And there was a fantastic demand for that. So we had a fantastic first quarter for the paper business. Now the paper business was something which, people thought at that particular time, everybody is hopeful that all this thing will go away and the lockdowns will be off by the second quarter, etc. So people in anticipation, all our customers, etc., probably would have stocked a lot of things. Now the thing is that second quarter came and the lockdowns continued, so the demand again fell. So the paper business again, second quarter went down. But what happened was that suddenly our real estate business took off and our textile business took off, particularly the bed linen textile, for which we had depended on exports. And we were actually having orders from US to the extent that we could not meet from our own capacity, so we had to actually take outside capacity to meet those orders. So now, okay, paper has gone down, but now textile has gone up. We have started having a lot of bookings in our real estate business. So of course there was some percentage of cash flows that were coming from those things. Our leasing business was not affected. Everybody was paying rents to us properly. So, it kind of balanced out for us, at least so far, at least for the last 2 quarters, it has kind of balanced out. Certainly, we've taken a hit on the, the profitability and the top line. But at least as far as cash flow, we were able to ride the, crisis. Of course, I mean, at the end of the day, we did the same thing that the whole world was doing, put a stop on all capex, started monitoring the cash flows, the oversight that was provided was very frequent compared to normal thing, and fixed costs were under scrutiny, etc. So we did all those things, which everybody did, I guess. So nothing strange. But for us, we actually really didn't feel the change that much, Ankur, to be very honest. At least as a CFO, I didn't feel, a real kind of a crisis, etc. And to give you, there's something in some other forum I just remembered right now. I said in another forum was that, all these strategies and transformation, I give this example give the sports analogy, that all your strategies, etc., or whatever transformation you want to do, etc., is decided before the match starts. And once the match starts, if you come across a particular crisis, you cannot go about going back to your strategies and transformation. You give a tactical response to those things. So most of the things that we did was more in terms of, doing tactical things in terms of the response, but we stuck to our strategies that we had faith in that, maybe accelerated a few things, etc., etc. But we really didn't feel the change so much, and a need to change something that we already had planned, because probably we had planned everything which probably would make us ready for the future. And I don't think anybody in this world could have planned for this crisis in any case.
Yeah.
It is just that if you have a good strategy, you are more resilient to what is happening around you. You will be affected, but you will come out of it faster and you'll be less affected also.
Yeah. And in such a time, you were of course fortunate to have that funding in place before the lockdown happened. But you know, let's say if that was not the case, hypothetically speaking, how big a role does the larger group play? Let's say in this case ABG, how big a role can they play to sort of support the individual businesses? Because at a group level, of course, ABG is flush with cash, or has strong credit rating, so pricing with the banks would obviously be attractive. Does that trickle down to individual group businesses also, or to
So
what
there is,
extent?
Ankur, I would say there is a, I mean, there is always a arm's length distance between all our companies, even in ABG, etc., etc. So it is not that one company comes to the rescue of the others. Them that is around, we'll reach out. We can reach out to a few people who can probably help us in a particular situation. We have corporate cells which can actually help us in certain areas. We have various kind of corporate cells, etc. So we take those kind of help, and yes, the rub-off, as I said, probably I got a better rate than a double A rated company, was probably because people know that it is a company chaired by Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla, so there is no risk, etc. that uh, uh, is attached to it. So those kind of benefits you certainly get, but directly, I don't think any of the ABG companies, come to the rescue of others in terms of uh, giving suddenly if you need cash requirements, so somebody gives a cash, and even if they give cash, it is at arm's length, so there would be it would be just like a borrowing from anywhere else. I would probably be taking, etc. and all that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's how it is. I mean, I hope I've been able to answer that.
And within your businesses, so there is the three businesses you talked about. Typically, if any one business is sort of facing greater stress than others, are you able to then, sort of cross leverage the strength of the other businesses in such situations?
Currently, see, the way we have structured the pie chart of our business is, in terms of turnover, for example, 75% turnover comes from pulp and paper business. Okay?
Yeah.
And 25% comes from the textile business. Textile company is more like a badge of honor that we always been a textile company. So we set up a small textile company in Bharuch. Even in terms of, although if it's a 75-25 kind of on the turnover side, on the EBITDA side, probably it is more skewed. It is like 85 and 15, those kind of things. So of the total EBITDA that I get, probably 85% comes from pulp and paper and this. So yes, we are little vulnerable to the paper business right now, I would say. Because that is the cash flows of these two businesses put together. The free cash flows are what we are partly using to fund our real estate business. The rest of it is going to be borrowing, and once the cash flows of the real estate business comes into being, which probably would be in the next 2 to 3 years, probably we'll be able to then balance out the whole thing. So yes, to a great extent, for a few years we do carry a little bit of a risk particularly on the cash flow front. But then, as I said, our balance sheet being deleveraged, I have a scope for increasing debt. So I can always use that as a lever to, ride the storm.
Yeah. What are some of your philosophies around, managing the business as a CFO? I'm sure, given the wealth of experience you've had, there are certain tenets and certain philosophies that you operate with regards to your businesses. Anything that you'd like to share with the larger audience, the larger team?
Well, see, I feel the business as if I'm not running the business, I'm just party to the business. And we have people, there are CEOs, there are procurement heads, there are sales, marketing head, etc., who are there, knowing everything everywhere. So, in terms of running the business or whatever it is, there is very little that I would probably be contributing, which is more out of sometimes, it just suddenly strikes a particular which I can, recollect and then tell them, this is what happened, and maybe we can look at this way, or they're facing some sort of, uh, uh, commercial roadblock or something like that, I can probably provide them a solution or something like that. If they're probably tying up, let's say, for example, they're doing outsourcing, for example. So in terms of tying up the commercials of the outsourcing, probably I can help them out in those areas. And of course, they look up to me for those areas. But in terms of directly getting involved in the business and giving them ideas how to run the business, I don't see. I think that is, in my opinion, a big mistake that probably finance professionals do in most of the business, that they interfere too much in the business part of it, rather than being, more of a support to the various teams that are working on it. So I look at my role from that perspective, and I I see my role is to ensure that the company is healthy, financially healthy, as well as is taking care of all the risk management aspects of the company. So wherever there is risk element, I would certainly be concerned about it, and I'll probably highlight it. In fact, one of the things that people might think that I'm getting into an ERM. We don't have an ERM over here. So I'm right now in the process of rolling out a ERM policy and framework, for example. But this was not because it of COVID. It's not because COVID happened, so I suddenly woke up and I said, this was already in my goals in the PNB that I have prepared in Feb, that this is what I'm going to roll out in the next year. So these are the things that, will keep me informed about what is happening. And wherever I feel that my input can be valuable, I would certainly give it, but not on a ongoing basis. I don't think that is the job of a finance function.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting take, Snehal. What we've also seen, often talked about in forums is how the role of the CFO is becoming more strategic, and they're almost like a co-pilot to the CEO in many ways. How do you see that manifesting in your own business context? While you mentioned that there is obviously ample support that comes in, and financial discipline is obviously a key area, and risk management, of course.
Yeah. So Ankur, what I can say is that around the time I qualified as a chartered accountant, this was probably in the late 80s. Mine and probably all people who were doing CA at that time, their horizon was essentially to grow in finance and accounts, which included bookkeeping, tax, audit, MIS, etc. Maybe an analogy I can draw is that the CFO's role has changed in the same manner as that of the woman in the society. What I mean is that you are no longer the mute member of the family who works hard but has no role in major decision making.
Yeah.
I feel the length and the breadth, the dimensions of your role, your influence, your involvement in the business has undergone a paradigm shift. I certainly say that. So I guess today CFOs, for example, assumes responsibility for even one or more of, say, technology. There are many CFOs. Technology reports to the CFOs. Operations sometimes report to the CFOs. In my case, even legal and secretarial, which is, I think, right now common, that they report to the CFOs. And I have in ABG Group, I have examples where some of the CFOs are even running a line of business. For example, in the life insurance business, one of the CFOs is running the group business, group insurance business, for example. What I mean by group insurance is not ABG Group,
Yeah.
the insurance which is given to a group of people or whatever it is. So certainly there is now, it's not the old guy who's to sit in a, what is the word that he used, bean counter or whatever. He's no longer that. He certainly is involved in all and every major strategic decisions that an organization is taking. And I think that is a long way that the CFO's role has changed, in my opinion. I think that is the biggest change, which is very apparent right now.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I love the analogy. I just wanted to touch upon one aspect of the businesses as you've been navigating, the challenges of COVID. How did you respond from a supply chain standpoint? What we've seen in a lot of industries is that there were massive, disruptions on the supply chain side. A lot of, AAA rated corporates ended up, suspending payments to their vendors or elongating credit terms indefinitely. Suppliers, of course, are facing manpower issues. How was that experience for you and your organization, and what were some of the mitigants that you put in place there?
So again, Ankur, that's a good question. Actually, it is. I understand. So fortunately, we did extremely well on that. For example, just after the lockdown, our first focus was to get collect our money from our buyers, etc. So particularly in the paper business, it was extremely good. People were paying well, etc. We were able to extend our credit period for our suppliers to a certain extent. See, what was happening is, once for paper, our benefit in the first quarter was the plant opened. Once the plant opened, and it was not just our plant, but even the other plants in the paper business, they were opened. So the customers were knowing now that business is going to go up, etc., etc. So they were willing to, continue with the old. We used to actually have an advance payment from our this. So they were happy to make the payments, etc. And the rolling was going on. To a certain extent, creditors, we extended the credit period, and that was fine for us. So on that aspect of payment, we certainly didn't have an issue, but certainly we had issues on the logistic aspects in terms of supplying stuff, etc. So for example, we have cutting centers across 2-3 markets that we are in. So we had some stock over there, so we could supply from there. We made arrangements and took permissions, etc. Because we were in commodity, in essential commodities, we could get certain permissions to move certain trucks, etc., etc. But yes, permissions is one thing, but willingness of the truck owners and the truck drivers to transport your material is also a challenge. But I guess some of our teams were successful to a great extent. I don't know how to work that out. Of course, textile business was completely closed, so we just could get orders, and we could only produce and stock those things. And now I think we are in the process of exporting those stuff, because domestic market is even today is not so good. But then it does not affect me a lot, because at least the 50% of the business is going, and in any case does not contribute much to the pie in my this. So my focus is always on the pulp and paper business, which is a natural thing,
Yeah.
There is an associated question which sometimes comes to me, how do you manage how do you manage a diversified what is the finance role in this? So see, I've been, as you mentioned in the beginning in my introduction, more than 3 decades in the ABG Group in various industries, and I'm not even a typical CFO because I've been in various functions of the businesses, etc. So I've seen the whole gamut. So what happens is, the way strategies are made or made the budgets are made, etc. I have seen what happens. It's a diversified company. Okay. So which business are you in? How much is it contributing to the top line, bottom line? What business cycle are you in? What maturity stage are you? Is a particular business? Is one growing, one not growing, etc. etc. So you take into account all these parameters together, and then you decide, how to do a capital allocation for a particular business, where to give more attention, more oversight, and where to just keep a watch, and so this is how probably a diversified business is run. And I've seen that is the way it is probably run across ABG uh, group. So I've seen it, and actually that is more than my CFO skill. It is the experience that I have had, which I'm drawing upon when I'm running this particular role.
Yeah. And that's very interesting. Just last, I think, a couple of weeks back, we had a conversation with the General Mills, finance director, and he happened to make a very interesting point. We were discussing the role of, the CFO and what are the, skills that are needed to play that role well. And I think he resonated with this point. He said that, look, traditionally in India, people become CAs and then they join the finance function and they spend 20 years in the finance function in hope of sort of becoming a leader there. But what is absolutely critical for the role of a CFO to perform it well is to get a broader business exposure and perhaps to even lead a business. And that is what gives you true understanding of the business, which then allows you to play the finance role, amicably. And admirably. So I think that I'm not sure if that's practiced widely enough in India, but I think I think you seem to resonate from that point as well.
Ankur, if is somebody going to ask me my advice that I would like to give, say, to an up and coming finance professional, for example, what will be the most important advice I would like to give them is, for heaven's sake, don't fall into the trap of thinking that finance is the single most critical function in the organization. And, the hard decision I have seen, hard decisions, tough calls, usually are taken by the sales and the procurement folks, along with the CEO. And it is not really the finance guys. And as a finance person, at least what I do is, I try to assess the general nature of this sales and, procurement guys. Hopefully, I have worked with them for a couple of years or something like that to generally know, what is their nature. So, for example, I just check, is this guy a pessimist or is he an optimist, for example? So, for example, then, okay, if this guy is pessimist, then what I would do is, I'll add a premium to whatever forecast he's giving me, which I'll use in my working. And naturally a discount, if he's a optimist. Maybe just the vice versa for the procurement guy, for example. So I'll, based on that, you keep on recalibrating your finance projections, requirements, etc. More importantly, to provide confidence to the team that you are fine with whatever the situation. My real estate guy should not call, "Hey, Snehal, I've got this deal. I hope we have the money." I have to tell him, "Don't worry, you go ahead with the deal. We will get the money." That's all. I have to give him that confidence. So the role of finance is, to balance the entire organization's operations and not really to glorify the finance function. You are, and you cannot be the know-all, be-all, and end-all of any organization. So this is what probably I would, tell anybody who suddenly wants to take a finance function because he thinks, "Arey, kya hai? Matlab, hum log to boss hai company ka."
Yeah, that's a great point. I think being able to almost play the role of an orchestrator, across different functions, and providing them that guidance, support, etc., that's needed, and the confidence that is needed to go about doing their jobs well. I think that's a very relevant point. And I think that's pretty much all that I had. Snehal, thank you so much. This has been a very interesting conversation across a variety of topics. To be honest, not all of which I envisaged at the beginning of the conversation, but it's been absolutely enjoyable. So thank you so much for contributing.
It's been my pleasure to Ankur. I mean, I love to talk, to be very honest. So you gave me an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And if there is something somewhere else, some other topic that you want me to talk about, and even if I don't know about it, I'll certainly try to talk about it.
No, fantastic. No, thank you so much.
I absolutely enjoyed talking to you. I think I hope I been of some help to the people who will probably watching this. And probably be able to learn something from them. And I would love to have comments from people who have watched this in terms of what probably they think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be sure to share feedback as we share this with a larger audience. Again, thank you so much, and that's it from our end at Cashflow Unscripted. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Cashflow Unscripted. Until then, let's thank you from my end, Ankur Bagheria, and on behalf of Snehal at Century. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.